There we are. Now we really truly are back. And I am sorry for that slight hiatus. Let's take a few moments to draw breath. Take a look at this image and say, what a prat. He can't even work a simple little studio on the internet. But you're absolutely right. We can't, or I can't, and I I find it sometimes once I actually put my foot in it, I find it very difficult to get my foot out, and is I think it's very important actually at this stage for us to be reminded, please be reminded who we are. Okay, that's who we are. Mirador Television. Broadcasting, a fine word, isn't it? Broadcasting out of the White Hart Hotel in Lewis at the start of a new season. Today is the first day of a number, I suspect, with interesting stuff from around the world and locally. Mentor Kevin Kramer and I had a long session yesterday here in the hotel, assessing where we can improve, what we've been doing wrong. It's going to take a while, but we're on the right track, I think. One of the things that I didn't do that we recommended is to wear a tie. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Anyway, let's take a quick whip through. The Daily Express. Harry finally admits that the royal family is not racist. Aha, right. Bit late after stirring up all the problems. The Sun. We never called the royals racist, he says. Meghan and I are as cleaner than clean, purer and purer than the driven snow. Ha ha ha. Having created something that keeps on hitting the headlines, and why it does, I don't know, is now they're trying to backtrack and say, that wasn't me, Yoth. Well, no, not I. Of course not. No. You've had your little day. Now you want to blame somebody else for it. The Mirror. I didn't say the royal family was racist, but the main headline is one rule for Rishi. And I suppose that I do feel sorry for the bloke because essentially he is very wealthy. I mean, he's super duper duper rich. And this is always going to be held against him. Anytime that they make any legislation whatsoever to try to better those of us who are in financial debt, it's going to be pointed out that he has a big fat bank account, thank you, and doesn't have to worry about things that we have to worry about. So why would he understand? Well, we need leadership. That's what we need. We don't need somebody who is going to say, oh, I'm a nice bloke, and why don't you just like me? There's too much of that around altogether. Basically, he is trying to, his 5-point plan. He seems to be trying hard, but he is not able to shut off this image of lots of dough, lots and lots of moolah, and is it Missoula? He says even my slang is losing out this morning, but it is one of those things which I think legitimately we can ask to keep an eye on. If we go hungry, does Rishi be allowed to buy in or bring in or import foods from elsewhere? Well, I don't know. It's one of those things that we need to determine, isn't it? Is this vast wealth? We are soon going to have the system where you can easily, much more easily than now, make a comment. So we can actually go in the morning, and you can actually say, "Hey, shut your big fat mouth. Here's what the case is." Well, I'm never going to shut my big fat mouth, because one of the great things about democracy is, excuse me if I just, I've been doing so much talking, my mouth is dry. Uh, mm. So the prime minister has got to, and I would, if I was him, I would get some PR men going on it, because once this whole idea that he's a rich man telling the rest of us poor sods what to do is, once it gets stuck in, it is hard to rake, get rid of it. In other words. The royals were complicit in Meghan's pain, says the Duke. Oh dear, we got that. Right. The Guardian says that the Prime Minister is looking at a one-off cash offer to end the nurses' strike. And secondly, other newspapers have carried this hinting that there is close to a breakthrough, so the nurses don't have to walk out. The Guardian is more positive than that. It says the Prime Minister is actually looking at that. Staying with the medical theme, the Eye says that 250,000 adults go to A&E, accident and emergency, as they can't get a GP appointment. Now, I must say that I do actually have some sympathy with them trying to get help in as much in as good a way as they possibly can. We do not have the elite group that is supposed to run us with any sort of sense of excitement at all. Any sort of, hey, what we're doing is we're doing this for you, and not doing it because it's on the schedule for him to do. Is the Prime Minister really needs to get his act together and to get the team. Now, in fairness, commentators are beginning to change their views, and they're saying that he is trying to make good and become a good Prime Minister and solve the problems that we're at. But it's a perfect storm, my darling, a perfect storm. And getting out of that one is not going to be easy. Anyway, the Daily Star is yabba dabba hairdo. As I pointed out earlier, I am somewhat bereft of hair on the top of my head. And I understand that now that there's a cure for baldness. So if you're losing your hair and you don't want to lose everything else, is make sure that you look at this bald cure. Now, let me say straight away, chaps, that the method is supposed to be that if you are bald and a little over the age of 40, you turn out to be very sexy to the ladies. That's what the research says. So I'll be damned if I'm going to do anything about curing my baldness. And I'm certainly going to doff my hat much more so they can see I qualify on all counts. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Yes, yes, yes. Now, the Financial Times carries front page stories. I say stories, they're all on one theme, which is much more serious than the stuff that we normally take a look at. And the issue is with China. China has done recently a lot of saber rattling. It has become much more bellicose about its rights to various communities and islands and cities in Southeast Asia. And as a consequence, we have to be very careful about how we react to this and how serious we need to take it. But the Financial Times says the US bolsters the military ties with Japan to counter Pacific threat from China. Now, the American government and the Japanese government and those who are materially affected. And before we go any further, let me say that nowadays in the global village, all this stuff is affecting us here in Lewis than it is other people. Hey, and the Japanese and the Americans, who were sworn enemies in 1945, are now saying, yes, yes, we are worried about what's happening in Southeast Asia, the bellicose nature of China, and the general concern in the area that he's going to create a problem. Well, let us yes, let us now take a little bit of a moment, and yes, just a little bit of a moment, and we'll take a look at. There we are. Let's do this while we invite Diane Dark, who is going to appear at the Lewis Speakers Festival, but she's written a book, and she is an expert on the Ottoman Empire. And I have lived in a couple of countries that were previously subject to the Ottoman Empire. So what she has to say will be very pertinent and very interesting to me. Let us hope that it's pertinent to you. It should be. We should worry about these things. Shall we take just a moment? Well, let's hope that we have sent an invitation to Diana Dark, and let's hope that the whole system works, and that in the next little while, the run up to 10 o'clock, that she will appear at the in the green room, as they call them. In other words, while she will wait to come on and have a chat to me. And we do have an interesting lineup this week of speakers. And unfortunately, the old man is Stuart Dolby is under the weather. I actually saw him yesterday, and he came into the White Hart while I was here to have a cup of coffee, and he really did look poorly. But he's a fighter, and he will try to be here on Wednesday. But if not, you'll just have to put up with my type of interviewing techniques, which is I always go from a position of ignorance, because I say I interview people to find out about them on your behalf. So if I actually, as many interviewers do, cock it up by presupposing certain things because I know all about it, is no. Right, okay. We should be pretty pretty okay. One of the things that we are talking about a great deal on Mirador is um, the lack of leadership that we've got. And that is not only at the top level. We're not only having a go at Rishi Sunak, and for that matter, Keir Starmer, but all the way down the line, I know very little about the county, the county representation in the county council, the East Sussex County Council, which has a terrifying amount to look after because its remit is huge. The next down is the Lewis District Council. They're the people that actually collect your tax. It collects the council tax. And I am not at all sure that they are doing much of a job. They are full of criticism. But, one of the things that I think that they are doing is that they are going along with that old political maxim is if you're not sure, do nothing. In a docudrama about the Kennedys, there is a scene in which it's an imaginary scene, it's recreated, but apparently most of that docudrama was based on stuff that actually happened. And the demands for the end to the Vietnam War, the demands for a more secure view of the threats coming from their partners, such as Cuba, is John F. Kennedy is with Robert Kennedy in the White House and looking at the gathering storm, the gathering crowds who are lobbying to get the Kennedys to do something. But at long last, President Jack, looks at this gathering of the clans and he realizes that the old days of politicians just shutting up and paying no attention to what's going on outside have gone. And he says in some concern to Bobby, Jesus, Bobby, what do we do now? And Bobby says, what we've always done, Jack, in a crisis, nothing. Well, that worries me that political maxim is in full flow at Lewis District Council. I find it difficult to see anything that they do well, with one exception. One exception, and I suggest that that's not because of the traffic and chat and administration itself is what it is they probably got a very good head of department, and that is in garbage collection. They are absolutely superb there. They do a really good job. And after bonfire, it's absolutely astonishing that at 4:00 in the morning, after thousands of people have tramped around, you cannot see a bit of litter. Not quite true, but they do an excellent job. But after that, it seems to me, and the little birdies that I know inside government tell me, that the Lib Dems who are in charge at the moment and have got the chairman of the Lewis District Council, actually the leader, I think they call it, is trying very hard to bolster the candidate who will stand on behalf of the community here, and that this is the man who will undertake to, I assume that Maria Caulfield will run again, is the man who will take on Maria Caulfield and hope to make the district, Lewis District, Lib Dem. Now, that's all well and good, but we did not vote this man in. We do not pay for the support for the council leader, who happens, strangely enough, to be the candidate, is to use council time, council money, council resources, and basically the council absolutely everything to push for his candidacy for the Lib Dems. If he wishes to stand for the Lib Dems, good luck to him. But he is, in my book, walking a very dangerous line by using the facilities and the exposure and all the things that a council leader can have in terms of profile for his own ends. It's not right and it's not proper. But the thing is, he is focusing his time on the political aspects of the town and not those things which are absolutely required of somebody who represents us because they are part of the local council, not the Lib Dem party. Lib Dems already, in my book, they've made themselves look like idiots because when they came in, they started off with how iniquitous the cabinet system is of governance at the local level. Huh? Well, let me say that the moment that they got into power and they realized that this helps you if you're in power, it's not democratic, brought in by Tony Blair in 1997, not democratic, but that you are not there to push your candidacy. You are there because you presumably have got the nous, that you have got the ability, that you've got the experience to lead us through very difficult times. And that is nothing to do with you standing for the next general election. So cut it, quit, put your efforts into what we expect from you, and that is to attend to the myriad of problems that we've got in Lewis. One of the big ones is of his making, not him personally. And in fact, it was the Conservatives that did it, but joining up the administration of Lewis and Eastbourne. What a crazy idea. A kindergarten child could have told you what the result was going to be. Absolute chaos, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. And in fact, very little is done. So I hope that I've made my point. He won't pay any attention, and the Lib Dems won't. I know that the Lib Dems were turned down by a splendid candidate for both town and district council. But he said to me, I cannot countenance the fact that what they're doing is that they are pushing their own political party and their own political beliefs. That's not why you're there. It's to actually successfully administer what it is that we are expecting and what it is that the council should provide. And it ain't doing a very good job. Not at all. And as for the town, that's even worse. And there it's not the Lib Dems, it's the Greens. A lot of the issues that we expect to be addressed, particularly in these very difficult times, are not being addressed because they're all playing politics. And first of all, at town level particularly, I am pushing for no political parties. No political parties on the ballot sheet. If I want to stand, I stand as Keith Hayes, not Keith Hayes, the raving loony monster party or whatever. And it should not be. We should have people who, because it is small enough, we should have people who desperately want to make sure that we have a comfortable lifestyle, that we have the services and the positive issues to make life good for us in this town. None of the above, said Brewster. And right, okay. We just had a little thing from Diane, and we used the wrong email. So here we go. We will try again. We will try again. Two. Right. Diana Dark. Diana Dark at outlook.com. Oh, Diana Dark at outlook.com. Let's try that, and let's see this works this time. So here we are in the middle of a rant, and I hope that we are going to have Diana Dark, that we got it right this time, and she will pop up any minute, and it has been working remarkably well, our links over the last little while. So I hope that it's not just me buggering it up. It's, we'll see if it works in the next couple of minutes or so. If not, we'll have another go, because it is important that we bring to you the fairly important people. And Diana is going to actually be talking about her book at the Speakers Festival, which takes place not this coming weekend, but the weekend afterwards on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I think that if you can take a look at the list of people who will take part in that festival, is some very, very impressive speakers. Mark Rattray, who actually puts it together, does a marvelous job, and his list of speakers is always first class. And why have we got that? No idea. No idea at all. We got a split screen there. I'm sorry, I'm playing around, and Kevin smacked my fingers for this, but the system has worked. The old man has managed to conquer technology. So let us welcome to Lewis and to Mirador Television, Diana Dark. And
hello.
Very good to you.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, success.
Yes, indeed. Now, if you look at the cut of my jib, you can tell that technology often comes over me, and I cannot make it work. And normally I have a young man here who punches and buttons and so on, but it's the start of a new year, and I think he stayed in bed this morning. So you just have to put up with me. But it's lovely to see you. And you indeed are something of an expert on the Ottomans.
Well, one way or another, yes, I didn't set out in my life to become an expert in the Ottomans, but through decades of living and working in Turkey and the Middle East, it seems to have happened of its own accord.
Well, I found the Ottomans fascinating. I spent 2.5 years working and living in Kosovo, And the
Wow.
Balkans, of course, were very key to the Ottomans. And I'm sure that you're going to smack my fingers for even suggesting this, but that in fact it was Belgrade where the Ottoman Empire sort of was brought to an end, expansion. But then I'm the amateur. You're
Oh,
the professional. So
well,
perhaps you would tell us about your book.
well, indeed. Although, actually, before we get on to that, I am curious to know why you spent 2.5 years in Kosovo, because I visited Kosovo as part of the research for this book, and I was I was blown over by the place. Actually, it was so much more multicultural and open as a society than I expected. I mean, and there were towns there like Prizren, which was like some little microcosm of the Ottoman Empire. I mean, I was absolutely astonished by it, and there it was, full of young people, teeming, the cafes teeming, no veiled women, no, none of the sort of stereotypes, in other words, because the reason I wanted to write my book is to try and dispel some of these stereotypes about the Ottomans, and to point out that, yes, despite the awful final decades of their demise, and let's face it, most empires do end badly, they did, they had a great deal that ought to be ticked up to their credit, basically, over their 600 years. And you don't last for 600 years without getting something right. So,
Well, no. I mean, Prizren is a very interesting town, and in
yes.
fact, we do have a loose association with
Right.
the Prizren television.
Oh,
Uh,
right. Right.
as
Excellent.
when it actually first went on the air, I actually was what I was doing there was I was in charge of a program to try and help local media come to grips with the fact that it's got a freedom at long last, having come out from under the Serb dominance,
Yes.
to operate fairly freely. The trouble is that they took that as being able to say anything,
Wow. Yeah,
so we
well,
had to work with them.
yes.
And
Yes.
but Radio Prison, television prison is one of my very favourites. And when they
Right.
opened up, they did a live feed to London. So here I
Right.
was sitting with my feet up in prison in Kosovo and being
Yes.
watched on television in London. It was a rather strange
Yes.
feeling.
Yes.
But
Yes. Yes.
I agree with you. And when people say to me, out of all the places that you've been to, Keith, where would you like to go back to? And the
Yeah.
answer is Kosovo.
Kosovo,
Uh,
exactly. No, I'd go back there like a shot. I mean, the people were delightful, and they really deserve a chance, frankly. And they do get a bad press by and large. Actually, is my impression. I was a bit. I mean, I should confess straight away that the Balkans is the area of the Ottoman Empire that I know least about. I'm an Arab specialist, Arab world specialist. I'm an Arabic speaker. I chose to study Arabic at university, and so the Arab world is my main focus. But obviously, a lot of the Arab provinces, came under the Ottoman Empire. So, and Turkey, I know extremely well. I've written 5 books about Turkey over the years, and so those were the areas I knew best. So I felt I had to do a big road trip, actually, in the pandemic. I mean, quite challenging.
yes, indeed.
I had to cross 20 national borders, to make the drive all the way down to Albania. And it made me think, my goodness, in Ottoman days, none of this national borders nonsense. You just, everything was one giant single market. No barriers to trade. No, it was a much more, conducive to good relations, to multicultural relations. Everybody traded and got on with everybody else. They lived
Yeah.
their lives separately. They worshipped separately. And that was fine. The Ottomans didn't mind as long as you paid your taxes, essentially. That was their philosophy.
Well, of course, in Kosovo, you can see that in the populace, a strong Turkish
Yeah.
influence.
Yeah.
A lot of them, quite proudly, have a Turkish background. The other area where your expertise in terms of Turkey is, I spent some time in Yerevan in
Yes.
Armenia, and
Right.
looking
Yes.
across the no-go border
Yes.
to Mount Ararat. is it's that again is a wonderful experience, and I think that Yerevan is one of my favorite places too.
Well, I agree. I mean, as somebody who climbed Mount Ararat on my honeymoon, I'm with you all the way. Yes, yes, no, I agree. I mean, from the top of Mount Ararat, you look down into 3 countries, don't you? I mean, that's the thing.
Yes,
You look down into what is today Armenia, what is today Turkey, and what is today Iran. And interestingly, on the climb up to the summit, the only other people climbing up with me were a group of Armenians who had who had climbed up from the Iranian side, because it's actually not possible.
you
It's
go
too
across the
difficult.
border there.
Actually,
Yeah.
the most difficult. Well, it's not just that; it's actually the most difficult ascent from the Armenian side.
Did you get a peek at Noah's Ark?
Sorry.
Did you get a peek at Noah's Ark?
Well, at what they claim is Noah's Ark, yes, which is actually at the bottom. So it's very convincing, I have to say. I mean, I was, quite sort of half convinced by it. It's got all the right shape, it's the right size, but people who know more about geological, freaks than I do, all say actually it is just the relic of some earlier flood. I mean, and there were plenty of floods in that region, and
Yes.
a lot of geological disturbance. So, geologically, it is a fascinating part of the world. My goodness, some of the rocks I came back with still adorn my bathroom, and I stroke them every time I go into the bathroom. They're just fabulous.
Now, Diana, let's just go back for your background. I mean, you said that you almost by accident became an expert on Ottomans. And actually, you can say today to a lot of people, the Ottomans, and they sort of blink. They really don't quite know what you're talking about. So how did you start this interest and become an expert on the Ottomans?
Well, as I explained, I mean, really, my writing career started as a hobby, actually, because I was working full time first for the government as an Arabic specialist, and then commercially. And I went on holiday to Turkey and thought, wow, this is back in the 80s, and nobody had written about Turkey. And I thought, good Lord, what an incredible place. And I'd always been warned off it. Everybody had said to me, "Oh, don't go through Turkey." And when I'd driven out to Lebanon as part of my government-sponsored Arabic course, I was actually working for GCHQ at that time, and they paid for me to go out to Lebanon. And I, instead of taking up their offer of being flown out via Brize Norton to Cyprus and going that route, I said, no. I want to drive. I want to have my car out there. I want to be free. So I insisted on taking out my tiny little deux chevaux and driving it all the way out there. It was on that drive, everybody said to me, whatever you do, don't go through Turkey. It's so dangerous. You can't possibly go through Turkey. So I was warned off it. And on the way out, I didn't go through Turkey. I got a ferry from Thessaloniki direct to Tartus in Syria. But on the way back, I thought, right, okay, well, the course is finished now. I can take my time coming back. I'm going to drive back through Turkey. And that was the start of my love affair with Turkey, if you like. That was 1978, by the way. So,
right. I didn't know that you were a lady spy.
Well, that was many decades ago. Many decades ago. And not as exciting as you might think, I can assure you. But anyway, so that was the start of my love affair with Turkey. And I thought, wow, what an incredible place. I want to come back here on holiday. So went back the following year on holiday and thought, wow, what an amazing place. Why is everybody so rude about it? Why is nothing written about it? So it just started like that, actually. I thought, well, why don't I write something about it? It was as basic as that. And of course, that's all pre-internet days. And I went to Stanford's in Piccadilly, the great travel bookshop, and looked at the shelves to see what existed on Egypt and Greece, because Turkey seemed to me to be the big gap in the middle. and tourism was just sort of beginning in the 80s to Turkey. And so I took down the names and addresses of 7 publishers and wrote a proposal to all of them. And to my astonishment, 2 of them replied and were happy to do it. So I actually had the choice of 2 publishers back then, with 0 writing experience. And as I said, this was as a hobby. This was on top of my job. So, but I loved it. I loved it from the start. I loved Turkey. It was, my first book was about Aegean and Mediterranean Turkey. And it did very well. And my publisher said, okay, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, I want to do Eastern Turkey now, because nobody knows anything about Eastern Turkey, including me. And, I'm now curious about Eastern Turkey. And so he said, okay, off you go. It was wonderful. So I went off, in my holidays from my job, instead of going on holiday, I basically, all my holidays turned into research trips. And that's been something a pattern for the rest of my life, actually. And it's been terrific, because it gives all my holidays, so-called, a purpose. So I'm always on some mission or other on my holidays, and it's been great fun. And I've loved getting to know Turkey. I've followed it very closely. It's such an interesting place. But of course, that said, we're talking about the Ottomans, and it's important to say that the Ottomans themselves did not even consider themselves Turks. Back when the Ottoman Empire was founded in 1299, to be called a Turk was like being called a country bumpkin, an illiterate shepherd, or something like that. So the Ottomans never saw themselves as Turks. It was not a Turkish thing. Yes, the individual sultans were of the family that had come in to Turkey from Central Asia, Osman's family, after whom the Ottomans are named. But that was it. The Ottoman Empire embraced 72 different ethnicities. 72, can you imagine that?
Wow, yeah.
12 different languages were routinely spoken. To be bilingual or trilingual was entirely normal. I mean, it was it was the most cosmopolitan, multicultural, state on earth, basically, and that was the reason for its success. And modern Turkey, obviously, is just what was left of it, if you like, after World War I, when it all got dismembered and carved up by the victorious Allies, and who, of course, then got to write history about how it all worked and stuff. So this is what's left us with this rather, jaundiced view of the Ottomans. And of course, then, to add insult to injury, Ataturk completely went about reversing everything the Ottomans had done. And suddenly, to be a Turk, became a badge of honor. And indeed, if you weren't a Turk in Turkey, you were in trouble. Like the Kurds, they had to be rebranded Mountain Turks, and forced to and forbidden from using their language and on all this. So Ataturk, in his so-called reforms, if you like, utterly reversed everything that the Ottomans had done, and Turkey became, what we know today. And in a curious kind of way, what's happened under Erdogan since 2000 is a kind of backlash against Ataturk. The sort of, the Islam and the religion that was suppressed by Ataturk has sort of come to the fore again. And it's very interesting how history works like this. It's such a fascinating subject, and history was never a strength of mine, I have to say, at school. It was my least favorite subject. So that I should sit here and have written books about things like Ottoman cultural legacy. Well, in fact, the publisher said to me, we want you to write a cultural history to commemorate the 100 years, the centenary since their demise. And I said, no, I don't want to write a cultural history. I want to write a cultural legacy. I don't want to just write a boring sort of, start at the beginning, end at the end, sort of progress, chronological history. I want to do a much broader thing than that, which is why the book is arranged thematically across the entire, all 3 continents, that the Ottomans spanned: Europe, Asia, Africa, across the 600 years, looking in the broadest possible way at the cultural legacy by arranged, chapter by
Is,
chapter, theme by theme.
is you suggest that it's a really sophisticated cultural society. Who were the militants? Who were the people that went and burst over borders?
Well, they were the Janissaries who they set up. Their own specially trained military groups, and I mean the Ottomans again. The way the Ottomans began. I mean, obviously, and this is also something that people don't talk about. So the armies, were not armies of marauding Turks, or in the way that we might imagine. I mean, when Mehmet the Conqueror took Constantinople in 1452, he had 100,000 Christians fighting on his side, against the Byzantines, and these were disillusioned Christians, who were fed up to the back teeth with the heavy taxes of the Habsburgs, and they were persecuted by the Habsburgs because they were the wrong kind of Christian. They were largely sort of Orthodox or Protestant or whatever, and didn't fit the Catholic mold, and so this has been a bit of a theme. I mean, the Ottomans took in many Christian refugees from persecuted by European states and countries, including, of course, in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal. The Reconquista, when Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic king and queen, came in and expelled all their Jews, and then in piecemeal fashion most of their Muslims. The Ottomans welcomed in the Jews too, and said, "Look, we'll take you." I mean, they even sent ships to fetch them and bring them to the Ottoman Empire, and Jews were never persecuted under the Ottomans; they were persecuted under the Europeans, basically. So there's
it's so easy to pigeonhole, isn't it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That that this sort of thing about the noble Christians fighting the despotic Muslim Turks, is the Disney version of history, and it's important to understand that that we must get away from these black and white things, and try to see things in the round, because it was a much more complex picture than that. And yes, to go back to your original thing, I mean, the Ottomans had an extremely effective military system through their recruitment of the Janissaries, and eventually all of that became dissolute and corrupt and all the rest of it, in the way that it happens with all empires. But they were very revolutionary at the beginning and extremely effective. The reason they were so effective was that their logistics were superb. Food, for example, and I talk about this in the book, that they were so expert at getting the food chains ahead for the army. They had a whole teams of people who would go in advance, including people who were baking fresh bread, taking live animals, so that when the army arrived at the next destination, the tents, the food, everything was all set up, and they were, they had everything they needed to be able to fight on, and that was obviously, a hungry army doesn't fight very well. So
yeah, can I ask you, because I'm very interested in the Templars, who also got that route down to the Middle East and so on. But it does seem that people in those days were able to set up these incredible lines of communication, which we almost can't do today. Now, what was it about that time that gave them this ability to set up a system such as you just described, and which the Templars put in place?
Well, I mean, remarkable command of logistics, spending a lot of money on the forward supply chains. Money. No expense was spared in this kind of thing, and it's very expensive to fight wars, and you can't do it on a shoestring. You need a lot of money, and of course the Templars were experts in money. I mean, they if you like, sort of almost founded our banking system. That their networks became very rich very quickly. And the Ottomans, obviously gained wealth from their newly conquered provinces. But having conquered their provinces, on the whole, in the early days, the people, who were then under them, were left alone to live their own lives, to worship in the way that they wanted to. And to organize themselves. I mean, they had an Ottoman governor who was put over the top of them. And if you look at Ottoman maps of the empire, there are always lines drawn on these maps as if there were borders. But in fact, these are purely administrative borders for tax collecting purposes. But having said that, their taxes were pretty favorable. And it's one of the reasons why to be an Ottoman was actually something that people wanted to be. They wanted to be an Ottoman citizen because what the Ottoman state gave you was the freedom to be an entrepreneur in whatever way you wanted to be. It gave you full support, for trading, by providing these caravanserais everywhere, which were free of charge, which, you could stay on your journeys for up to 3 nights in these caravanserais. Everything was provided for you. It was a remarkably enlightened system, if you like, built from the bottom up. And so the first Ottoman capital, Bursa, which was the capital for about 40 years before it then moved over to Edirne on the European mainland, before it then moved to Constantinople. So Bursa, the first Ottoman capital, is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And the thing that UNESCO recognized there was that the Ottomans had this model town planning system, where everything is built for the community from the bottom up. Very, very interesting, very enlightened way of creating a community. It's like creating a community hub in the center where everything is free and open to everybody. You don't just have to be a Muslim to go and use, the public baths, the markets, the soup kitchens. They had soup kitchens to give food to the poor. Anybody could go and use all these facilities for free. And there wasn't some greedy entrepreneur making money out of all of this, because the Islamic system, they have what's called a waqf, or in Turkish a vekif. It's the same Arabic root, whereby all of these services are funded through the profits that are made, that are generated in the souks, in the bazaars, and from the baths. The actual money is redirected into the maintenance of the buildings and paying the staff. So it's a sort of self-perpetuating system where no one individual gets rich, but the society is very egalitarian, basically, remarkably egalitarian. So you don't get privileges by virtue of being born into them, apart from the Sultan's own family. Everybody else, it's a meritocracy, basically. Anybody can get to the top. And that is shown by the fact that, the Grand Viziers, who are essentially running the show, they were from many, many different ethnicities.
You're talking to one of the great meritocrats here. I'm a great supporter of meritocracy. I think that it's academics, with all due respect, have discounted it and will not pay any attention to it. Diana, just a moment, if I can get you to pause, because I'm going to try and bring in from New York one of our regular correspondents, part of our team, Suzanne Mouchot, who is a leading architect. And she normally joins us at this time. And I thought it may well be that she would like to chat to you for a few minutes. So let me just try this, if you'll be patient, because once again, I'm going for the technology. It shouldn't take me long, I don't think. And I always say that, and it always does. But
don't worry.
There
What
we
time
are.
zone?
That is
If she's in the
done.
States, this must be very early in the morning for her. This must be
She is
crack of dawn.
wonderful. She's a most intriguing character. I use the English expression, and I call her one of my blue-arsed flies, because she's all over the place and does lots of exciting things. She's bubbly and wonderful, and she gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning to join us.
Wow. Yeah, that is impressive.
So I hope she did say that she got a cold today, but she would try to join, and I hope she does, because I think the two of you will have one or two interesting things to talk about.
Well, I mean,
But it
is my big thing these days. It's the thing that completely obsesses me, architecture at the moment. I mean, the book I'm working on at the moment is the Islamic backstory of Romanesque architecture, because to my eye, it's clear as day that an awful lot of what we call Romanesque, as if it came from Rome, is clearly Islamic in origin, and so it's I'm setting out to prove that, basically,
yes.
which is fascinating.
Did you see the Roman arch in Prizren when you were there?
I did, yes.
I mean, that's quite astonishing, really. I mean, it's lasted for a few hundred years.
Yes, and the bridges. So many of the bridges in the Balkans, people say, "Oh, it must have been the Romans who built them," when in fact they're Ottoman. That's another curious thing. The bridge that was blown up in Mostar, in the war.
Yes.
People, historically, it's recorded by the first European travelers, the 19th century travelers, when they went off on their grand tours and things. All said, "Oh, it must have been the Romans who built such a magnificent bridge." And so, of course, it then, for most Europeans, they think, "Oh, yes, that was a Roman bridge," not understanding that it was built by the Ottomans, in the 1500s. So,
yes.
The Ottomans rarely get the credit for things. One of the reasons I wanted to write the book was to try and set that straight a bit.
Yes. Well, I mean, the work that you're doing is, do you see it as trying to bring a greater sense of understanding about the Ottomans? Well, I mean, we because of perhaps the impact on our own culture, we tend to look at the Romans and say, yes, they did this and that and so on. And we don't really appreciate what the Ottomans did. But I mean, exactly what you're saying demands a much wider congregation.
Well, that's right. I mean, essentially, we are all products of our education system. And I mean, I am as much as anybody. I was brought up to believe that Greece and Rome were the fount of all civilization, all knowledge, and that was that, really. And I just accepted it as a child. I was lucky enough to, as a child, be able to travel quite widely in Europe, because my mother was German, so we used to travel to Germany every summer and then do little trips from there. So I mean, I went to Greece and Italy a lot as a child, and I just always accepted, oh yes, of course, this is the fount of all civilization. It was only when I switched to Arabic at university that and went to the Arab world for the first time, and went to Turkey for the first time, that I realized, my goodness, the Greeks took most of this stuff from further east. The Greeks didn't invent these things. and so bit by bit, I began to realize that, I had a skewed view of things that was the product of my own education system. So I learned to re-educate myself. And I do think it's important, especially in this day and age where everything, Europe is no longer the center of the universe. We have to be honest about these things.
Let's switch to architecture, because here she is, Suzanne Mouchot. Meet Diana Dark.
Hello, good to meet you.
Good to meet you. I have barely any voice, so
oh dear.
Nice to meet you too.
Well, you're in the profession that I really wanted.
She's interested in architecture of her period, Ottoman. So I'm going to step aside, and I'm going to let you to have a talk about it.
All right. Well, I didn't hear what you were talking about, Diana, but it sounds like super interesting.
Well, I wish I'd been an architect, I tell you. I mean, now, late in life, I'm beginning to realize I really should have been an architect. It's clearly my my profession manquait.
Ah,
So good for you, lucky you being an architect. It's such a fabulous thing. It involves everything basically in terms of your mental faculties, literally everything. And so I'd love to hear what kind of architecture you specialize in.
sure. Well, I do agree with you. I think architecture is a wonderful profession. I mean, any architect is fortunate to have it. And I do think you're right. It's one of the truly integrative kind of professions where you have to kind of know a lot about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, um, well, my career has been kind of a funny one. I started at a really large architecture firm called Paycov Fried, Ian Pay's office. And I was there for a lot of years. And I had my own firm for a lot of years. Then I went to Columbia University, worked on a few jobs there. Then I went to a company called Zubatkin, and I was hired to run the Gilder Center for the American Museum of Natural History. And that project is designed by Jeannie Gang. So I worked on that for 5 years, and it's actually opening in February. So that's nice. And most recently, I was at a university, running a university, and it's 4 campuses. And building new campuses and transforming the student experience. So I'm on to my next adventure, which is actually working with a lot of companies in Europe, really doing business development for companies in Europe, getting more business in the United States and around the world, and stone companies and artisan studios in Italy. So I heard you're in Italy. I caught that. I've been to Italy. Yeah, it's an exciting thing. And buildings are amazing. I was able to teach a class this past semester, and the students were just a joy to be with, and all full of questions. And but yeah, so that's what I've been up to. So what your interest is, history, or what is your actual?
Well, I mean, I'm an Arabist by training, by
Wow,
university,
amazing.
and so the Arab world is my main focus. But Turkey, sort of almost by accident, became part of that focus, and so, the Ottomans obviously covered the Arab provinces as well as into Europe. This is the beauty of them, that they are so all-encompassing. But I was just explaining to Keith about how Bursa, the first Ottoman capital, is recognized by UNESCO for its unique town planning. So, when you talk about planning a campus, I don't know if you're familiar with Bursa, but if you go to the UNESCO website and look up Bursa and read what they say about it, it's quite, it's impressive, basically, because it gives you a sense of the Ottoman worldview, the way that they wanted to found a state. That they realized that you had to keep society happy and give them all the services that they required in a sort of, pretty much free, basically, and to encourage trade, because trade made prosperity for everybody. And so the way the Ottomans went about that was pretty revolutionary, actually, for their time. I mean, they had a vision, there's no doubt. The Ottoman vision shows in Bursa, and it became the sort of model Ottoman city that then got followed around the empire. And Keith and I were talking about Prizren in Kosovo, which is a sort of example of that, actually, of a very, very successful multicultural town, city, where, on the main square, you've got the synagogue, the church, and the mosque all together on the main square, which is just terrific. And the way it should be, that all these communities live alongside each other, respecting each other, but interacting, on many levels. And the Ottomans fostered that through their architecture. And personally, I find that fascinating, because I do think architecture has this incredibly important role to play, especially in city centers.
No, it certainly does. I mean, it can reinforce and also destroy relationships.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the tower blocks of London. My God, what a disaster zone.
I was just recently in Verona and Venice, and I went to Verona and then to Vicenza and to Venice, and and had not really traveled much, during the pandemic, obviously. And so to be in each of these little cities, little towns, and seeing the history, and also just kind of wondering, as you say, I mean, what exactly was the thought process behind it? How did the new portions of the city emerge from the more kind of the medieval plans, which I still find to be so much more comfortable than modern cities,
Well, well, you know that Venice, of course, is essentially an Islamic city. I mean, there's a wonderful book called Venice and the East by a lady called Deborah Howard, who was the architectural historian, professor of architectural history at Cambridge. She's retired now, but she devoted 10 years of her life to writing this book. And it's all, very, very well researched, beautiful pictures as well. And so in the book that I wrote before the Ottomans, that are stealing from the Saracens, which is about how Islamic architecture shaped Europe, my chapter on Venice is all, I freely acknowledge that she is the source of a lot of this information. And she shows how the Venetians loved, the Islamic world. They were trading with them all the time, and they just basically adopted all of their styles, all of their lifestyles, the little narrow alleys, the roof terraces, the altanas, as they call them, I mean, all of these things, the gardens, all of their lifestyle things, and the architecture with all the arches, it's all directly taken. The Doge's palace is modeled on a Mamluk palace in Cairo. I mean, it's all been proved to be the case that people, we Europeans don't think of Venice as an Islamic city, because we've been conditioned to think of it as, this wonderful, exotic, European city. But the minute it's actually pointed out to you how, well, yes, but look, that is Islamic, that's Islamic, that's Islamic, you kind of have to admit that actually the beauty of Venice is because of its Islamic architecture.
And its connection. That's true. I don't know if Keith told you, but my father is also an architect, and so is my oldest brother.
Wow.
But my dad was at the American Academy in Rome for 2 years. He won the Rome Prize, and he then toured kind of the world after that. And his kind of research about history and about how city planning kind of influenced how people lived in cities and what different cultures kind of influenced the cities was always something I grew up with. So there was always, it's sort of like, well, don't think that only came from there, So it was really a wonderful thing. But when I was in Venice, I went to Foundation Cini. Do you know that the island that's, San Giorgio has Foundation Cini?
Yes.
And it just reminds me exactly of what you just said. I mean, it was literally like being in a sorry, I can't even speak, in a Middle Eastern city with the gardens and with the arches, and then with the such a different kind of approach about symmetry as well.
Yes.
It's exciting.
And having even though you're dead in the center, you have this privacy. You always have this private space, which is again a very Islamic thing, that behind the walls you don't see anything, but you have this sort of you step through the door into a different world, basically, and it's. I mean, for me, I should say actually that I still have a house in Damascus, in the old city of Damascus, and this is really what got me properly into architecture, because when I was researching a book on Syria, I discovered by accident that it was possible for me as a foreigner to go in and buy a chunk of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I thought, what? That can't possibly be right. But in those days, you could. And so I set about the process. It was far from straightforward, but I did succeed in buying an Ottoman courtyard house. It's a mix of 17th, 18th, and 19th century round the courtyard. So one wall is from a different century, because over Damascus suffers from earthquakes, so wars, fires, whatever, so one part of the house is destroyed, it gets rebuilt in another century. So you've got this incredible sort of hybrid house. So I bought this semi-derelict house right in the center of old Damascus. And really that's when my real interest in architecture took off, because I did a 3-year restoration project with a local Syrian architect and about a team of about 15 Syrian craftsmen, stonemasons, carpenters. Their skills were just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I was just bowled over by the whole experience. And so that's the sort of bedrock of my what's really set me off big time into architecture.
Well, you have to send me pictures. I have to see this.
Yeah. No.
How often do you go?
Yeah, well, and what I'm working on at the moment, the Islamic backstory of Romanesque architecture, is another sort of. It's all started from that house in Damascus, actually. With the zigzag. I mean, the zigzag is the key that unlocks everything, because I had this zigzag pattern all around the courtyard. This sort of zigzag, 3 zigzags running around. And when I bought the house, I said to my architect, what on earth is that? What is that zigzag pattern? And nobody knew. It's just one of those things that have got lost, over the centuries. And I now know what it is because of a series of sort of coincidental things. It goes right back to Egyptian hieroglyphs, would you believe? It's come down through Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's the symbol for water, basically, this zigzag. And it's come into Islamic architecture, and it's used in all fountains. One of the things in Islamic architecture is public drinking fountains. One of the things you do is you provide clean drinking water everywhere for people. It's one of the services that you must provide for everyone, free, obviously. And the fountains always have a zigzag pattern where the water flows down. So it is this deep, sort of archetypal symbol for water. But it's been lost. And the Normans in Sicily, which Sicily had been a Fatimid, ruled by the Fatimids for 200 years. So when the Normans came into Sicily, they saw the zigzag in the patterns there everywhere. They used it a lot around arches and everywhere. And the Normans adopt it and bring it here to England, where Romanesque architecture is even called Norman architecture, after 1066 and William the Conqueror came and conquered England. And you read any book on architectural history about Romanesque, and they'll tell you the zigzag is a Norman invention. And that just annoys me, because it's so clearly not a Norman invention. And so, I've now proved where it all came from, and the buildings themselves are the evidence, and I want people to know about it, so that they understand.
Ladies, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to shut me up, and you've done a marvelous job. And in fact, I'm only going to shut up for about 5 seconds, because we just do have a statutory obligation to tell people who we are. And we are Mirador Television, broadcasting from the White Hart Hotel in Lewes, and broadcasting to the world. And that's why it is so nice to have 2 people with great international experience to pass on. We actually do have a viewer in Patagonia, and we are widespread. But we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to shut up again, because I think that the 2 of you have a common ground, and it is fascinating and interesting to hear what you both have to say. So carry on, ladies.
Well, I'm curious, Diana, to hear about what you think about the cities of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and what are your...
Don't get me started on Dubai. I mean, I had the misfortune to live in Dubai for 3 years, and that is the complete opposite, if you like, of the Ottoman approach. That is society from the top down. All the architecture is from the top down. They only care about the elites. The elites with the money. It's all money, 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 and that's it, basically, and show and ostentation. And the poor, well, forget about the poor. They can sort themselves out. I mean, I can't begin to tell you, as you can already sense, it's not my favorite part of the world, and it really does, to my mind, represent the opposite of the Ottoman concept of the bottom up in architecture. And I mean, you really must go to Istanbul. Actually, you will
I'd
have
love
your mind blown away by Istanbul, because that obviously retains quite a bit of, the sense where you have different quarters in Istanbul. So you have the Christian quarter, you have the, well, these days you actually have the Syrian quarter from all the refugees and things. But there are many communities within Istanbul, and that's what lends it its phenomenal richness and its a special atmosphere that you do not have, I would say, anywhere else. I cannot think of another city in the world that has that same sense of embracing so many different cultures and ethnicities. And the city itself, perched there on the headland, where the Ottomans put the Topkapi Palace, on the headland on the European side, but facing out across the Bosphorus and and towards the Asian side. I mean, just geographically, it sums it up as well, that it really is sitting there right on, facing outwards in all directions, across into the Mediterranean, into the Black Sea. I mean, it was just, and I think these days, especially, just to bring a bit of a sort of even broader context into it all, with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. Turkey has a huge role to play in all of that too, and Ukraine was part of the Ottoman Empire, and the reason it got taken away from the Ottomans even back then was because the Russians came in and took it. So history is repeating itself in Ukraine today. That Russian meddling, trying to expand their own empire, whittled away at weakened the Ottoman Empire as their own power was waning anyway. So yes, do go to Istanbul. You will have an absolute ball. You really will. You will see so much.
I'd love to. Actually, that my dad had a few drawings of Hagia Sophia.
Yes.
And they were some of my favorite drawings, because the minarets are so spectacular, and but they're so different from his other drawings of Rome. It's like you can just tell the difference. And I have yet to go to Istanbul, so I look forward to it.
Right. Yes. Well, again, the whole thing of domes, building the domes. One of the things I learned, the Islamic double dome was again something that came into Europe and was used in Florence Cathedral, and of course Christopher Wren, who built St. Paul's Cathedral in London, openly said that he used what he calls the Saracen style to build his dome, because the Saracens understood vaulting and how to do domes in a way that Europeans didn't, and so the technology for that came in from the Islamic world, and people as open-minded as Christopher Wren, was able to acknowledge that perfectly freely. And it's and even in America, the U.S. Capitol dome is an Islamic double dome. When you look at the cross section of it, you'll see it's a hollow dome. The interior dome is different to the exterior, and that is an Islamic concept. It's a way of getting greater height into the building to give it an imposing exterior without having to carry all that weight, and then lowering the interior space. It's absolutely fascinating.
It really is. I mean, actually, just the study of domes, that's just a course in itself in architecture.
Completely. Yes. No, it really is. Yeah. No, there's no end to it. This is what I love about architecture. There's just no end to it. You can burrow away and research all you like, but you're still only scratching the surface.
It's true. It's funny. A friend of mine, when I was in architecture school, my dad would send me, like by mail, photographs of buildings and have me guess the architect, the name of the building, the year it was built. Yes. And some of them were more obscure than others. So some of them took me some time to figure out. So a friend of mine tested me the other day, and I didn't recognize the building. But it's so funny. Now I noticed components of it that were unique. So then I searched, 4 different words, 4 different architectural kind of archetypes, and then popped up this, what this building was. And it's just amazing that there are things that are just hallmarks of design decisions that can lead to a search, like a successful search. It's amazing.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now,
Well,
we are almost at the end of our time. In fact, we've only got 3 minutes to go. And Suzanne, Diana is anticipated as a speaker to talk about her book in Lewis next week.
Oh,
So
great.
perhaps she can just tell us very quickly what aspect of her exciting and interesting life she's going to focus on at the book festival.
well, it's going to be an illustrated talk. I've got a very visual kind of a brain. Here's the book, by the way. It's absolutely beautifully. It's been beautifully done. It's very well illustrated, and so my talk is I'm going to show pictures and talk you through pictures to sort of show you the Ottoman Empire and its cultural legacy through the pictures, and that way you kind of absorb it through the images, and you can gain so much more, I think, by actually seeing it. And it will be very broad ranging. It will cover architecture, but it will also cover music and literature. I mean, the sultans wrote poetry, believe it or not. I mean, again, we've got this image of them as violent men, but actually they loved gardens and gardening. Mehmet the Conqueror used to do the gardening in the Topkapi Palace. And this was relaxation, and the Turks, the Ottomans, have a huge appreciation of flowers. So the cover of the book is the tile work from the Rüstem Pasha Mosque, which has got, somebody has calculated, 82 different variations of the tulip in the tile patterns. It's just phenomenal.
Oh, I have to get that book. I have to buy it now. Is it available already?
Yes, it is.
Right.
It is. Yes. No, it's just called The Ottomans: A Cultural Legacy. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's the illustrations are beautiful. They really are, and
I can't wait.
They do the Ottoman legacy proud.
All right,
Right,
Keith, is it
ladies, thank you very much indeed. We filled a fascinating hour. I explained to Diana, Suzanne, how you zip all over the place, left, right, and center, upside and downside. And I thought that the two of you, particularly once I understood the breadth of Diana's travels. Strangely enough, the first thing that we discovered is that we both have lived in and enjoy Kosovo, believe it or not.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
I'm glad that there's a lot in the architectural world that is common to both you and Diana, because I think this morning's chat has been very enlightening, and I hope for Diana's sake that people begin to understand quite what the Ottoman Empire was about, and not just the wicked horde tearing down portals across Europe, the portals which you, Suzanne, would put back up.
No, it was so amazing to meet you, Diana. Thank you so much.
Well, and I wish you all the very best with your work. I'm so jealous of your profession, really. Really. And
we'll have to work together then. That's
yes. No, you must send me some pictures of what you do. I'd be fascinated. Yeah.
Okay, great. I will.
I'll send you on Diana's email, Suzanne.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's it. Is bang on 11 o'clock. So we have to say toodle pip. Don't forget, Diana, just tell us the time and the date. We know that it's at the All Saints Centre, but there are 3 days of talks. Which day is yours?
Mine is on the Sunday the 22nd, and it's at 11:20 till 12:30 on Sunday the 22nd. And the next day I'm off to Cairo. So right, yeah.
I may bunk off church to come and listen to you.
Right. Well, that would be great. Yes. Well, thank you very much for hosting us. It's been a
well.
Great
Thank you for a fascinating morning, both of you. And we are very informal here. You probably saw somebody come and put a biscuit on in front of me. And there's a lovely little Russian lady who simply comes into the hotel with her husband for coffee. And we've got to know her. And so she doesn't mind. She just comes in and she puts a biscuit in front of me because she's worried that I'm not getting breakfast. The other thing is that the two of you escaped actually face to face with her, because every time there's a lady that comes in, she barges down to her and says, "I've got somebody here that you might consider marrying."
Wow, matchmaking and biscuits is perfect.
Absolutely. See how I'm fussed over and looked after? Ladies, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
And
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Diana, I'm sure that people here look forward to hearing from you. And Suzanne, well, you're our regular, and I explained to Diana why I call you my blue-arsed fly. But it seems as if she does a bit of that dashing about as well.
It does, yeah.
Well,
goodbye
yes.
and toodle pip.
Okay, ciao.
Yes, bye-bye.